I'm now going to sing you a song. First of all, I'm going to say a few words on candor. We're going to talk about, you can probably turn it down a little bit. A few words on candor and about your bar applications. It's a very lengthy process. It's a very important process. The Board of Bar Examiners is an arm of the Supreme Court of Florida. They have nothing to do with the Florida Bar. Their job is to vet every applicant to make sure that the public is not in danger. And it's an imperfect process. My experience in dealing with them over the last, I'd say, 34 years, so you can tell I started when I was about 7, is that let me put it to you another way. John Moore, the former executive director, I've now outlived, I haven't outlived him, thank God they're still alive, but I've gone through about 5 executive directors. So I remain the same, they change. John Moore used to tell law students, and I love this about it, because he was not a lawyer. He was a retired Air Force colonel. I don't think he liked lawyers. He would say he would go to every law school orientation, and he would say, you know, my job is not to let you in. My job is to keep you out. And I'll tell you, that got the attention of my law school class. Now, since then, every executive director we've had since then, they've been lovely human beings. I'm not saying he wasn't. And so law students think, well, Michelle Gavani won't hurt me. Her nickname is Missy. And she won't. But they're very thorough. She's not on the board. She's the executive director. Think about who goes on the Board of Bar Examiners. These are people who are practicing lawyers. Why do they think that it's worthwhile for them to devote their time to the Board of Bar Examiners? It's for 5 years. Do you know that these people spend probably 400 billable hours? That's going to be very important to you later on, billable hours, that they give away. So if they're billing $500 an hour, they're giving away a couple $1 million worth of their time. Why are they doing it? They're doing it because in the practice of law, they see people who they don't think should be there. And so, by God, I'm going to stop that. Well, the problem is, you're not the people they see, but they know out there are people like that. And so, do you understand there's a default mechanism here that if they have to make a mistake, if they can't be certain, it's not exactly the same thing, but you know, in the Middle Ages when the Catholics and the Protestants were fighting over the doctrine of transubstantiation and other stuff, they would say a mass, and then they would, for everybody, the innocent souls in the village, they'd kill everybody, lest a Protestant escape or lest a Catholic escape. Well, the Bar Examiners isn't exactly like that, but you understand? All right, so that's why candor is very important. They don't know how you're going to behave in the future, but they do know how you behaved in the past. And you and I know that's a very imperfect way to judge. But that's all they have. It's like if you're going to buy a stock, AT&T, whatever it is, you're going to look at how it's behaved in the past, and you're going to hope that it behaves the same way in the future if you buy the stock. You and I know it's not a predictive value, right? It's the same thing with your lives in the past. The board is trying to figure out, is there something about what happened in the past, your behavior in the past when you were less mature, that is a clue to how you'll behave in the future. And they do a very extensive investigation. How many of you have already filled out your bar applications? Very few hands. All right, well, after you listen to our speakers today, I think a few more hands will go up. You'll definitely want to do that because it takes the board a long time, and let me tell you why. What the board does is after they get your bar application, they send out letters to every place you worked, to the police agencies of every city you've lived in, to people, houses, wherever you tell them you live, they send letters to people, the neighbors. And then when they don't get responses, see, it slows it down, right? They send out second letters and sometimes third. And then imagine when they get a response that's negative, what they do. They then send an investigator. Now they hire a lot of retired FBI agents, and the reason they do that, because the FBI agents are so thorough when they want to be. I know your generation's going to be hard to sell that on, but they can be thorough. And with the FBI, police agencies open up to the FBI agents. They'll just tell them anything because they're used to doing it. So your behavior in the past, you're going to have to explain it very well. And if you follow, you all received a handout, didn't you? Actually, it was sent to you. I hope you saved it to your hard drive. But you also say, I sent you some examples of how to write for the Board of Bar Examiners, and I sent you some rules. Please follow those, because you want to avoid miscommunication. My experience has been, typically what happens is when the board thinks that they're going to keep somebody out, it's because of a miscommunication. very little of what you've done in the past is going to keep you out. What could keep you out is the way you explain it. If you try to make yourself look better, like puffing on a resume, that they will view as lack of candor. And that's what you have to avoid. And that's why most of this presentation is candor. Now, something else. I'd like to see a show of hands of how many people have never driven 5 miles above the speed limit. No hands, right? Because we view it, well, everybody does it. You're on I-95. If you're driving the speed limit, you're dead, right? Truck's going to run you over. Well, that's for traffic. Having said that, if you drive more than 5 miles, if you start getting tickets, the board will look at that very seriously. But I'll come to that. But what I want to come to is this. I'm not naive. I've been practicing law for many, many years. I've been teaching for many years. And it's, no matter what I say here, some of you are smoking marijuana and will continue. And I'm telling you is you and I as lawyers make a choice. And the choice is to follow the law. Not the laws we like, not the laws we agree with, all laws. I mean, if you want to be a priest, you don't date, right? You want to be a lawyer, you don't break the law. Imagine, and I think I mentioned some cases of lawyers who, now we're talking about the Board of Bar Examiners, when the Florida Bar, when lawyers were accused of smoking marijuana and not even arrested, they were suspended. They had to write all their clients. We take this very seriously. It's unlikely any environment you've ever been in takes it as seriously, but we do, and the board does, because they're looking at this as a symptom of how you might behave. Very briefly, before I introduce our speakers, when you look at the outline I sent you, you're going to see that I had 10 areas. And the first one is candor in your law school applications. Who here has received from downstairs or kept a copy of your law school application? Show of hands. All right, now I should see every hand up here, because it may be that there was an inadvertent mistake, something you left out, inadvertent mistake, kind of redundant, right? Or something you didn't tell us on purpose, or something you told us that you need to look at that, because the board's going to look at it very carefully, and they're going to compare that with all the information they get from other people. And if those aren't consistent, they're going to say, why did you lie to your law school? Why didn't you tell them about this? And that raises the candor issue. Candor is the worst, by the way, because we have to rely on lawyers. Judges rely on lawyers to tell the truth. They can't double check everything you're doing. Also, this is something that, depending on your age, how many of you have applied for either a mortgage on a house, a loan to buy a car, anything with credit? Okay. What you need to do is you need to check what was actually filed. Because, again, my experience has been, and I don't think this will be a surprise to you, is that sometimes the closing agent terribly wants to close that. And so they will change your information. And then the board says, well, you signed it. Are you telling us you didn't tell us, you didn't tell the bank that you were making $10,000 a week? So I'm saying, please look at those. You'll be surprised in some cases that they badly wanted to sell you that car. Late bar applications, because the system takes too long, one of the examples, you're going to have at least one person here tell you, if you apply early in your first year, and you have to go to a hearing in your second year, you'll be cleared by the time you graduate. Imagine after 3 years of hard work, doing an excellent job in law school, you're offered the perfect job, but the board hasn't cleared you because you didn't apply till your second year, and maybe you have to go to hearing, or you didn't apply till your third year, and they're still doing a background check. You have to give up that job. But guess what? Your loans will still become due after a period of months after you graduate. And then all your friends will be working, and then you'll have to explain to people, I'd like you to hire me. Well, why aren't you a lawyer? Well, I wasn't diligent. You won't use these words. I didn't apply on time. Now, is that someone you want to hire to work for you as a law clerk or as a lawyer? I don't think so. Misleading bar applications. Your bar application has got to be perfect. If you have a question, when in doubt, disclose. If you look at the outline, you'll see some examples. Actually, I'll just a couple. One of them is you have the person who was asked about psychological problems in the past, and the person said, well, I was counseled by the professor who taught psychology of religion, right? Probably didn't apply, but that person didn't have a hearing. So in other words, if you think it's over response, don't assume the board will think it's over response. Misleading job applications. a couple of the examples, you know, on a job application, they will look at that. They will also look at your resume. There's a couple of the examples that are outstanding for me. A person on his resume said he'd been a corporal. He was a private. He said he'd been a commercial loan officer at a bank. He'd been residential. The board said that's a lie, right? And they made him wait out a year because of that. So don't puff. It's just not worth it. If you have arrests or any interaction with the police, you need to get copies of those police reports. We don't hire English professors or English teachers or English majors to be police officers. So what they'll do is they sometimes, some of them wait to the end of the shift and then they confuse this arrest with another arrest, so you'll have information that doesn't apply to you. Or they, to make sure that the judge finds probable cause, they'll put in some facts that didn't exist. And so what you will need to do is get those police reports. They all exist. Don't accept somebody's word they can't get it. I come to me and I'll explain to you how to get it if you're having difficulty. But what you need to do is you need to get those reports. And then what you do is you say to the board, this is what happened. Here's what the police report says. Here's where the police officer's mistaken. And then you won't be accused of lack of candor, which again is the big deal. Debts, live within your means. We're going to make it easy for you to live within your means because of our tuition. You're not going to have a lot of choice in extra spending, are you? If you have problem with debt, communicate with your creditors. Let them know that you can't pay now, you're in law school, but you intend to pay in the future. See if they can work something out. Save that correspondence. I know it's snail mail, or if they email you, fine, save it, because you're going to need to prove that you were actively keeping your creditors informed and you weren't being a scofflaw. We've spoken briefly about cannabis. Alcohol, one of the speakers is going to tell you about Florida Lawyers Assistance. Florida Assistance is a wonderful organization for people who have, and it helps a lot of lawyers. It's a very good support group, and it helps law students. And so, if it applies, or if you know, part of the thing here about being part of this class is you're all going to be friends for life. And you're all going to be very supportive of each other, not just in law school, but afterwards. You'll be referring cases to one another, you'll be answering questions. One of the hardest things there is to do is if you have a friend who has a substance abuse problem, is to convince the friend of that. And part of it is we just don't feel comfortable. Who am I to throw the first stone type of thing? Do it. Because otherwise that person's going to have problems with Florida bar, and more important, with the person's life. Traffic ordinances, you'll find at least one case where someone was kept out for at least 2 years to prove the person could go without committing a traffic infraction. In one case, I know what the person did, I know this sounds kind of humorous, is he went to Italy for a year. It didn't matter. And that way his American record was clean. All right, now we have several speakers, and a couple of them haven't come yet because they're in court. But the first one I'm going to introduce to you is Ryan Schroeder. Ryan is a graduate of our school, and he's not yet admitted, and he's going to tell you why. And so I think we have a microphone for Ryan if you want to stand.
How's it going, guys? So I graduated in 2014, and I assumed, like you guys, the first thing when you're in your first year is let's get through the first year and then get through the bar, and then so I submitted my bar application the last deadline you could do it before you take the actual bar exam. It's like a $1,300 penalty you pay. Like literally, I drove down to Miami International and put it in FedEx. Like that's how late I was in submitting it. And so I want to go through some of that with you and some of the things that I had to go through and answer any questions. I assume there are probably some people in here who have never been arrested or have only had a ticket or two, and maybe they've never even had a job or something like that because they've gone from undergrad to law school. And for those people, you probably don't have to pay attention to this. This is kind of more for the people like me who are bad at committing crime, or one of those things. They seem to get caught more than others. So that's kind of what I want to go through and tell you some stuff. So if you have any questions, save them for you. Let me give you my my background. When I was let me tell you where I'm at right now. So I took the bar in July of 2014. I thought it was easy, passed it, not a problem. I could have taken the bar 5 more times. I could have failed it 4 more times, taken it 5 more times, and still been admitted before I'm not admitted because I didn't put my application in on time. So think about that. When you're thinking about how important it is, and this is the last thing in your mind, you're gonna get to the point where you're studying for finals and all these other things. I could have failed the bar 4 times and passed it on my 5th time, and still been admitted this last September, and ahead of what I'm scheduled for, because I didn't do my bar application when I was told to, like you guys, everyone sat in here, right? Same thing. So that's really how important this is. So I'll give you the background. I had a couple arrests when I was in high school. I had an arrest. I was in student government for changing grades in the computer system. Kind of one of those ones that the bar doesn't like, had the word fraud in the charge and all those kind of things. I had it sealed and everything, but I did have the fortunate luck to have a criminal defense attorney who told me when I did want to go to law school, don't effing lie on your bar application or on your law school application. So that was like the one thing I really had going for me. And then I got into this, sat here in front of, like you guys are doing, and we did it in August when I started law school. So that kind of reassured it. So if anyone did lie, go and amend it right away. Because these people, this is, like Professor Braccialarghi said, they're not in the business of admitting people. They're in the business of keeping people out. So during law school, because I like politics, I guess I was pretty straight and narrow, but I was working on an election, and I decided when I was drunk one night I was going to throw the opponent's campaign sign in the trash can. And when I tell you, it was about, I came out of a bar and the window was here, the restaurant next door, I took it and it was about 5 feet. It was 5 feet and it was on camera. So I apologized to the guy, but before he knew about it, which sparked some stuff. And in return sparked the fact that could be occupied burglary. Because the restaurant, someone's in there, and burglary, entering with the intent to commit a crime there. So after a long, yeah, exactly. After a long process, the state attorney's office did a closeout memo saying that it wasn't criminal. I was never charged, never got charged, never arrested. They just investigated. They didn't think it was criminal due to the totality of the circumstances, but they thought it'd be best dealt with by the Florida bar application process. So you can imagine sending that letter to the Florida bar. Yeah. That's kind of my background there. And so I haven't had any candor issues, which seems to be the things that they basically get everyone on and they'll never let you in. But I applied in July of 14. It took a year to get a hearing. And everything these people do is slow. You can't call them on the phone. Everything you want to do, you have to send them a letter. The letter has to be notarized. They send you a letter back. You didn't notarize it. Send me another letter. I mean, everything takes forever. So it took a year to get a hearing. Then when I got to the hearing, they had stuff from when I was in high school. You walk in, I don't know, well, none of you guys probably know about the process. They do it at a hotel, so they do it around, they give you a hearing date, this and that. Well, first they send you, I guess, topics what they want to talk to you about. And it reads like a federal indictment. Everything you've ever done wrong in your life, you think you're a pretty horrible person. So you go into this room, and they got wires everywhere, and they got cameras on you, and, a court reporter typing. And they go through stuff. I mean, they were asking me, did you say when you were in high school that you didn't do this, that you didn't, and so you just, literally I was in there for 3 hours. And at the conclusion of it, they say, okay, well, we'll send you a letter. So you wait more time. The mailman's starting to wonder why you're at the mailbox every day, So you get this letter, and they go, okay, and in my case, they said, okay, we're going to recommend that you not be admitted unless you agree to this, these terms or whatever, kind of like a plea deal. And so they suggested that I do 200 community service hours and wait another year. So as you can see, this is a very, very long process. And so I think, if I can get anything off to you, I think it's when you should apply. You should apply now. And because I guess I don't know how to overemphasize how long it takes them to do things. And I've got some notes here. The other thing I made wrong too, and this is what I would do. I tend to sometimes know more than I do, or think I know more than I do. So I chose to, when I got my bar hearing, I chose to go with my attorney instead of hiring. I would have hired Professor Braccialardi if I could have done it again. But when it came time to go, if you have an attorney, and my criminal attorney is pretty good at, Professor Braccialardi said, listen, he's good, he's as good as me, phenomenal guy. Problem is, he doesn't do this all the time. So when I got my hearing date, he was out of town. He was going to be out of town. So I had the option of postponing it, which you wait a year for a hearing date. Who's going to postpone it? Or going with somebody in his firm who doesn't do bar hearings. And probably because I went with somebody in his firm who doesn't do bar hearings is probably why I waited another year and I do 200 service hours, which, as you can imagine, is a lot of service hours, especially because you got to get them in before the deadline. So it breaks it down to about 6 months, 7 months you got to do them in. So if I could do it again, I would have hired Professor Braccialardi. I would have. He doesn't tell me to say these things. That's my opinion. Or hire someone who does these, and not just that they've done them before, but that's what they do, so that they're, your schedule is going to be fine. They're going to already know these dates, because the Florida Bar, everything they do, they have to meet. Everything they have to meet, they only meet so many times a year, and so you miss one of these dates, there's another 2 months, 3 months. And in my situation, I was fortunate enough to have a job at a firm that it didn't matter, but most people aren't. So, it's just it's a crazy time game. I'm getting off track, I guess. Is there anything else?
I don't know. There'll be questions after.
All right, let me give you one more scenario about process, because there's probably a lot of you who don't commit crime. There was a student who went to school with us, Carl Dama. Carl Dama was an older gentleman. He went to school with us. He was a state representative running for Congress, a really squared away guy. But Carl's he's in his 70s, and so throughout life, he'd had a few things, not blemishes, just lawsuits and stuff. He was a chief investment officer for Northern Trust, very well-respectable guy. Carl didn't get his application in. He got it maybe a month before me, and it took Carl a year to get admitted, even though he had no problems. There was nothing in it, So you go into a pile where, unless you have nothing and you get fast-tracked, it's going to take time. So just, if you've had multiple jobs, or you're older and you've been divorced, or anything, you've been sued, one of his lawsuits was he was an owner and they sued the entire condominium, named every owner. You have to go out and get all these court documents and give it to them. So if there's anything, I would get it in right away.
All right, thank you. All right, thanks. Before I introduce the next speaker, there's something I'd like to say. It doesn't hurt. You don't have to hire me. In fact, I'm happy to recommend other people. All I'm saying, it doesn't hurt my feelings. I'll tell you who I think is good. Come to me, I'll give you the names, because there are a lot of people out there who say they do this. They'll tell you they've been doing it for years. It's not true. That's, for me, a big disappointment. I was mentioning that. So I just want to mention that. By the way, I'll help you with your explanations. I don't charge for that. Come by, let me help you with your explanations, and hopefully you won't have a hearing, and you won't have to hire anybody. All right. Our next speaker, all right, is Miles Schlam. Miles also is not admitted, but he's a very admirable person. I have tremendous respect for him, and I'll say quite a bit of affection for him. I think he's going to be a wonderful lawyer when he is admitted, and I say that because I know what he's done with his life, and I know what he did when he was a law clerk and what he did at legal aid. So, Miles Schlam.
Hi, everyone. I'm not going to bore you with my whole long story of events that since law school, because it's been a while. I mean, I've been out of law school since 2002, so I'm past the bar in 2003, and actually had to take the bar again because my results were stale, after 5 years going through all of this, and I never thought I would have to take the bar again after passing it the first time, but I never thought I would, so I kind of gave up on this whole thing, and then some time went by, and I just said, I got to keep going here, and I came too far, to not get my license. Yeah, if you want the details of my story, it'll be in my book that'll be written soon. My mom's here in the audience, so she came up with the name. It's From Jail to Yale is the title. Yep, I've been in both places. Yale was the mental institution, no, not the college. But that's okay. I did not. The thing I want to say is that, you know, the bar, the Florida bar is actually very forgiving. I mean, they understand that not everybody's perfect. People have problems. They know that addiction, substance abuse, mental health, these are, you know, are problems. They're diseases, you know, and that you shouldn't be punished for having a disease. You know, I myself suffered from alcoholism, which was a major part of my problem from the time I was, you know, 15 years old until, you know, most of my big problems with the law happened when I was 19, that year. Yeah, I think I got arrested 3 times that year. And everything was directly related to alcohol. And I was pretty much medicating myself from an anxiety disorder. At the time that I applied for law school, it was in the late 90s, and I was really in a hole at that time in my life. I mean, I felt like I really needed to do something to escape the situation I was in. I was working a dead-end job for my dad, who was the only one that would hire me, even with my fake resumes that talked about how great I was, and that was another issue that I had with the bar. At that time, I was enrolled in the Nova MBA program, actually, because I didn't think I could handle law school. I had a professor in the MBA program who was teaching business law, and he, you know, I was a criminal justice major at FAU. I graduated with the criminal justice degree. Finally, in '95, after 6-year college plan, bouncing all around, you know, because those years between '89 and '95 were pretty rough for me, but I finally managed to graduate with my criminal justice degree, and this professor in the MBA program convinced me that my heart was really in the law, and, you know, I should just buckle down and do it, you know, for the 3 years. And when I filled out that law school application, sometime in 1999, might have been 1998, I don't know. You know, I made a calculated decision that I was not going to disclose anything. You know, I was just going to say never had any problem. In fact, I wrote this beautiful essay about myself, which makes me want to puke when I look at it now. But, you know, I was probably drinking at the time I wrote it. And really embellished things, you know, talked about how I was helping the inner city youth in the projects and things like that. Part of it was true. I was hanging out in the projects, but I wasn't helping anyone, that's for sure. And those are the things that really came back to bite me. You know, I had no idea. I mean, this was just the way I did things, you know. Fake resumes, you know. When I wrote that essay for law school, for the law school admission, I said, all right, let's pretend I'm the person that I wish I could be, right? Let's write like an autobiography. And that's what I did. I came up with this fictitious story about myself. And I guess they bought it at St. Thomas. They didn't buy it here at Nova because they deferred my admission, and I wasn't going to wait another semester. I needed to get out of where I was and do something, you know, to give me some focus. At that time, I had no idea about the Board of Bar Examiners, I didn't even think I would ever take the bar exam, you know? It was just like, I just needed something to get out of where I was and to focus on. I was like, you know what? If I get into law school, that'll be a miracle. If I make it through, that in and of itself will be enough. And, you know, I talked to some people about it, and the advice I got from the people that I talked to was just to not disclose anything. So I made that decision. I got admitted to St. Thomas. I moved down to Miami. It worked, you know, it sort of worked. I mean, as far as helping me, it gave me, I had a new focus in life, you know, so I was pretty determined, and I kind of controlled my drinking, sort of, but I still managed to get arrested twice in the 3 years of law school, but I thought that was pretty good because I went 1 year without getting arrested, so, you know, that's not so bad, right? All alcohol-related stuff. In fact, I was just telling the gentleman here, one day was I was campaigning as vice president of the SBA, and I threw a big keg party to get people to vote for me. And so, yeah, free beer, that gets people to turn out to vote for you. Unfortunately, the keg had a lot left in it, and I didn't want to bring back a full keg, a half-full keg, so I started, you know, just drinking it myself right out of the tap, and wound up getting pulled over. I only lived like a few blocks away from school, but I got pulled over for speeding, and unfortunately, I didn't get a DUI, but I did get charged with reckless driving, and which is almost as bad. And then there was another incident here in Fort Lauderdale on like St. Patty's Day the next year, where I kind of ended up in the middle of a brawl that broke out, and those were just the kind of things that happened when I was drinking, and I didn't really think I had a problem with it. Now, when I went into law school, when I started attending law school, during the first week of school, orientation week, Professor Bracciolage actually came to St. Thomas, as he did every year, to speak about exactly what he's speaking about here today. But guess who wasn't there that day? I wasn't, because it was orientation week and it wasn't mandatory. So I was at Shula's drinking, happy hour or something. And I wish I would have been there that day. You know, I don't know if it would have changed my mind or not, because the fact is I could have come forward at any time during law school and amended my application. But I didn't, you know, because I made the decision and I just was going to stick to it. So that one lie multiplied itself, because in my second year of law school, actually my second and third year, I applied for a job at the public defender's office under the Uniform Practice Code, where I was actually a certified legal intern in Broward County for the PD's office. There was a question on the application, and this is what it stated, I quote it: "Is there anything in your background which might reflect negatively on your character?" That was an easy one for me at the time. I looked at that and I said, well, let's see. I put yes and start explaining everything that I never disclosed to my law school even, and start writing pages and pages. Or I just say no, because I don't feel like any of this stuff reflects negatively on my character. You know, and if anything, I think it helps me be a better public defender, was my rationale at the time. Of course, the bar didn't see it that way, and the Supreme Court of Florida certainly didn't see it that way. They were not happy at all. I would say that was probably the worst thing on my whole application, was when they went back and looked at that and my rationale, you know, and that I was actually a certified legal intern for the year with putting on my application, not disclosing anything. Finally, after 3 years of law school, I took the bar, passed it the first time, and then that's when I applied to the bar, a month after that. So I passed the bar in February of '03, and I applied for the bar in March of '03. At that time, I didn't know what I was gonna do as far as hiring somebody, but I knew it was gonna be a problem, and I didn't know the extent of how bad it was gonna be, but I knew I needed to talk to someone, and actually, that case I was told, that disorderly conduct from '02 was null prost, because they didn't really have any evidence on me, but the city prosecutor actually recommended, because I said, well, it doesn't matter, I'm gonna have to disclose this to the bar, you know, even though you guys null prost it, it's still gotta be disclosed, and it's gonna make me look bad. And he referred me to Randolph, but that was not before I had already hired a law professor of mine who was my TAP professor at St. Thomas. He had never handled a bar case before ever. He was a criminal defense attorney, was pretty good with the rules of evidence and stuff, but he convinced me that he could handle representing me on this, and you know, and I liked the guy. I thought he could do a good job, but you know, the first big problem was I had a sealed record from when I was 19, and I didn't even remember all the specifics, you know, like as far as dollar amounts and stuff of what actually occurred. And it took me about 6 months to get the record unsealed, because it was a sealed record. I had to go back to court and ask the court to unseal it just for the purpose of the Board of Bar Examiners. And so I got the record unsealed, but before that I had to give an estimate. I didn't have to, but I was advised by this attorney that I should just give a guesstimate of the amount. Well, it turned out my amount was off by a couple $100. So that became a whole nother issue, a whole nother specification against me with the Board of Bar Examiners. I mean, they had all these specifications, and I mean, the worst thing is lack of candor or, you know, dishonesty. And in that case, I wasn't being dishonest. I was actually, you know, that was to the best of my recollection. But they didn't care. So,
Miles, tell them about your recovery.
okay.
I think that's important.
While I was going through the whole process with the bar, who actually, the bar did recommend my admission in 2005 after 2 hearings with Professor Brachelargue as my counsel. They said, you know, I showed rehabilitation by clear and convincing evidence, which was a very high burden at this point to balance out all the negative stuff. But I pretty much worked for 3 years, or over, more like 5 years, full-time as a full-time community servant, working for Legal Aid, Women in Distress, the Broward Reentry Coalition. I didn't get paid for any of it. Also, in 2004, I entered into a contract with the FLA, Florida Lawyers Assistance. I actually had 6 months sober already at the time, but I did a voluntary 3-year contract with them where I was UA tested randomly, had to call a number every day on your phone, and if they call you to come in, you have to go drop a urine, and you know, they have groups every week. And that was very helpful. And, you know, they wrote an affidavit for me for the bar, and I think that helped. But I actually started going to AA in April of '04, I believe it was. So I'm coming up on almost 13 years without a drink or drug or anything in my system. Thank you. Yeah. I realize now that I was like barely functioning back then, if at all. But that was probably the most important thing that I've done. And I also work as a substance abuse counselor now. I'm an addiction professional. I went in that direction. So, you know, I probably could have been in the bar now if I had not waited so long, but I decided I was not gonna. There's no way I'm taking the bar exam again. What happened was the board recommended me in '05, but the Supreme Court of Florida, in the first time, unprecedented decision, which is actually in all your books, I believe, my name, the MBS case, they said that we are rejecting the board's recommendation to admit me because there's just not enough evidence of rehabilitation. Not enough time, they said. I only had like a year sober at that time. I feel pretty confident now with 13 years. Yeah, they did that. They said I needed to wait 2 years, and at that point I did the math and saw I was going to go over the 5 years and have to take the bar exam again, and I just rethought things and went into a whole different career.
You've taken it now, though, and you passed, right?
I took it in February, passed it again, and I think I pretty much said the important stuff.
Thank you very much. You'll wait around for questions afterwards, right? Thank you. Before I introduce your next speaker, let me tell you, because he only scratched the surface of his history. I mean, only scratched the surface. And so I was impressed when the Board of Bar Examiners recommended his admission. In fact, even the board's lawyer he had a hard time making a closing argument against it. And it took us totally by surprise when the Supreme Court said not so fast. But they said 2 years ago. And 2 years after 2 years had passed, I said to Miles, please reapply. And he's waited all this time, but I'm sure he'll be admitted now. Our next speaker is actually a lawyer. She was one of our best students here in every aspect, and it's the last person you would expect to have ever had a problem with the Board of Bar Examiners. And so I'm going to let Amy Shenstone tell you about that.
Hi, everybody. I want to thank Professor Braccialargi for inviting me. I come every year and do this speech because I think it is so important. Is this going to work? Okay. So, I'm from Canada. Is anyone else from Canada? Yay! So, I say that because I was invited to come to Nova on a full tuition scholarship. So, I really look at my time in law school like it was a huge blessing and a huge privilege to come here and to go to school. I started out my first year. I did the initial application with the Florida Board of Bar Examiners. I got pre-clearance. I was involved in all different organizations here. I don't know if you guys saw the ICHR, Inter-American Center for Human Rights, that's run out of here, 501 charity. Do they still have that? ICHR?
I think they do. Yeah, I think they do.
So I ran that for a couple years and was president of a bunch of different student organizations. I like to think pretty well in school. I was at the head of the class and everything was looking great, right? And then in my second year of law school for the summer, I went to Alaska to do an internship. Not blaming Alaska for anything, but let's just say in Alaska, there's not that much to do except for drink when you get off of work. And so, although I didn't really drink much at all in law school, my second summer of law school in Alaska, I definitely was drinking a little too much. Also, when I got back from Alaska, my grandmother died, my parents split up, my boyfriend and I broke up, oh, my dog died, and yeah. So that fall it was a little rough, and I didn't have a lot of friends here. Some close friends that I'm still very tight with to this day, but I didn't really know a lot of people here, and you'll learn soon when you're in law school, you don't really have time to do anything except study and go to school. So it was November of my third year of law school. My friends and I from school, we went to a conference that one of our teachers was speaking at. It was a sports and entertainment law conference. Professor Gabriella Boza, I'm not sure if she still teaches here. So we went to this conference, and there were some guys there that worked for a record label, and my friend and I really wanted to get into the area of law, and they invited us to this closing reception or party for the conference, and it was at this nightclub on South Beach. They said that they could hook us up with their bosses or the owners of the label or whatever, and we would get internships. And I thought, great. And I said, Mel, she's my business partner now and my best friend from down here, let's go. And she's like, no way, excuse my language, no way in hell am I going. We don't even know these guys, not going. I was like, okay, yeah, I shouldn't go either. So I remember it was on Saturday. The conference was Friday, and it was on Saturday that the event was. So I was at home, remember I was doing my homework, and I had, I think maybe like 2 glasses of wine at home. It was like around dinner time. And I was watching this show on the Supreme Court on TV. And apparently, Mel, this is what Mel says, apparently I called her, and I didn't say anything about deciding to go to this reception. I called her and was like, Mel, you've got to turn on to channel, whatever. The Supreme Court, there's a great show about it. She didn't hear from me again until the next day. In the midst of that, I decided I would go to this party. The guys came to pick me up at my house. It was at this nightclub on South Beach. It used to be called Play. Now it's called Ivy. I don't know if you guys have heard of it. I live in Miami. And before we go into the club, this is like red flag number 1, right? They take a bottle of, I think, vodka out of the trunk of their car and offer me like a swig of vodka. I was like, okay. I have a pretty, well, I had a pretty high tolerance to alcohol, so I had like 2 drinks at home, 1 swig of vodka, whatever. Go into the bar. I remember I bought a round of drinks for everyone as a thank you for bringing me, because I thought this was going to be great. I was going to get an internship. It was going to be fabulous. And then after that, I don't really remember much of what happened. I'll tell you what's in the police report. Apparently, when I went to pay for my round of drinks, my signature didn't match what was on my driver's license. It was like chicken scratch. And so the manager of the club started, I guess I thought she was arguing with me, and I was kind of arguing back. And I remember being so offended that she would think that I'd be using someone else's credit card. I remember saying, I'm in law school. Like, I am so ethical, and I'm so good, I would never do such a thing. And then apparently she called the bouncers over. Apparently I was like put over a bouncer's shoulder, taken downstairs outside. Cops were called. Apparently, that's what the police report says, a female police officer, who I found out later was quite small, I kind of imagined her as being big, she said, ma'am, you really need to calm down. And am I not allowed to swear?
Right.
And
I've heard it before.
and I was like, F you, you dumb bitch. And I smacked her across the face. Yeah, I know, really bad. And I've never been in a fight before in my life, right? I don't know what made me think this was the day. So, and then, so of course, her and the other officer tried to restrain me. And, I'd never had a police officer trying to restrain me, so I think what you're supposed to do is not resist, right? Instead, I resisted as hard as humanly possible. I think I tried to ninja kick her in the head. Yeah, no, I'm serious. And they called like all these backup guys. I kind of remember this part, because I remember I was wearing a dress, and at one point they were dragging me on the ground, and my dress was like around my waist, my butt hanging out, and everybody waiting to get in the club was outside watching, right? So the male officers come, they try to restrain me too. I had been working out a lot recently, actually. I had gotten a trainer here at Nova. And I remember one of the police officers like, wow, you're really strong. And I was like, I have a trainer. And yeah, it's ridiculous. I can't make this stuff up. And so I remember one officer was like, you need to shut the fuck up, or I'm going to tase you. And I was like, oh my God. Okay, so I stopped. Put me in the car. And then as soon as he closed the door of the car, I kicked out the window of the cop car. I broke my foot in the process. And the officer, apparently he had just gotten his car back that day. They'd been in the shop or something. Yeah, so they weren't too happy. And, I never say this part in the speech, but this part's funny. Mel reminded me of this. So, they put me in, I guess, like the paddy wagon thing, right? And I was the only girl, and I guess on the weekends, they pick up people who are getting arrested at all different locations across South Beach, right? So I was in my own little, like, dark box of the paddy wagon where I couldn't see anybody, and it was all guys, I guess, and the rest. And apparently, I kept screaming about I think I was screaming about, like, Sixth Amendment right to something, and then after, like, 45 minutes, I realized, oh, no, Fifth Amendment? And then when, so we stopped at the hospital because, my foot was broken, and I thought my wrist was broken, and I had, like, blood coming down here. And when I got out of the paddy wagon, all the guys who'd been in the paddy wagon were like, you stupid bitch, shut the fuck up. Because I've been screaming forever, apparently. And go into the hospital. No, they took us, like, outside the hospital. They have a special door where they let the people who are going to jail go in. And I remember saying, do I get my phone call now? And they said, no, there's no doctor here. The doctor will come, like, this was, like, late Saturday night, right? Doctor will come Sunday at some time, and you won't be able to do a phone call until after the doctor sees you. And I was like, screw this. Like, take me to jail. I need to call somebody. So they take me to jail, and that's when they give you your, like, arrest report. And this had probably been a few hours later. And that's when I actually read what they said I had done. Because at the time, I still don't remember slapping the female officer. And for a whole year after this, my criminal case took over a year to get resolved. I always thought it was an older, big black lady cop. And then when I met her, she's this tiny little Spanish girl. So that's just how bad I don't remember what happened. So anyway, get my little arrest report in jail. I'm like, no. Oh my God, this did not happen. Then my bail was like $25,000, something insane. And here's the tip for everyone. When you go to jail and you get a call, right, they don't give you a phone book. You really have to memorize one number that is either a 954 or a 305 area code, because they don't let you call long distance from jail. The only number I knew offhand, except for my mom's number in Canada, was my partner, Mel, who's the girl I mentioned earlier. So I remember this part. I called Mel. I was like, Mel, you'll never guess what. I'm in jail. This was her answering machine. It was like 4 in the morning. I was like, I need you to call my mom. And then I go, her number is 613-741. And then I go, oh, never mind. I was like, fuck it, I'll call you later. And I hung up. So Mel, bless her heart, reached out to my brother on Fate. My brother lived in England at the time. She found my mom's number and, like, old phone bills from when I called on Christmas the year before. Thank God for them. Sorry, I'm spending too much time on this part, but it's just so interesting, I guess, to relive it. Anyway, long story short, so I got out of jail, and here's where I screwed up the first part of my Florida bar stuff. I was so embarrassed about what happened. I knew that I had to tell the Florida bar examiners, but I just kind of put it out of my mind. And I was taking, I think it was evidence. I was in your class at that time. And I was a little scared of Professor Braccilargi before. Now, I love him to death, and I'll be forever grateful to him. But I was scared, and I was like, oh, my God, he's going to think I'm insane. So I waited too long. I think I waited after my 30 days. And anyway, I went to go see him, told him what happened. And I will say, Professor Barcalargi is so understanding and so kind. Anything you tell him, he's probably heard worse. So he made me feel very comfortable with talking to him. And he told me immediately I needed to fire the lawyer my mom had found. I don't know where she found him.
Found from the bondsman.
Yeah. He put me in touch with a wonderful lawyer who I'm still in touch with to this day. His brother is actually the head of Greenberg Traurig. I don't know if you guys have heard of them yet. It's the biggest law firm in the U.S., I think. And he said, well, we've got to, get going on your amendment right away. In the midst of that, I had been scheduled to take the Children and Families Law clinic in the January session, and I had gotten pre-clearance for that. And it's Dean Straffolino?
Yes.
Dean Straffolino who runs that clinic. So if you've read the Florida Board of Bar Examiners application and you are familiar with the rules of what you have to do to amend and who you have to notify, you probably aren't. I wasn't until this happened. If you get in trouble, you have to notify the school and you have to notify the Dean of Student Services, right? I notified Dean Straffolino. I thought, I'm notifying a dean. I'm doing what I'm supposed to do, right? No, I notified the wrong dean. So that was another point of issue the Florida Bar had with me, and that I had waited more than 30 days to notify them. And in the midst of this, we started working on my amendment, sent it to the bar. Of course, the bar sends back, tell us more what happened, blah, 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 blah. My criminal case took over a year to be resolved because the police officer, she didn't want to agree to any diversion program. Normally, if you've never been in trouble, and it's an issue like this, for a typical defendant, you'll be offered some kind of diversion program. You complete the diversion program, and then the charges against you are null pros, i.e. the state doesn't move forward. The police officer would not agree to this whatsoever. Oh, I should also say, so my charges, I had 3 felony battery on law enforcement, resisting arrest with violence, I think times 3, I don't know, disorderly conduct, and whichever one, breaking the cop car window. So I had a lot of charges. And the police officer wouldn't agree to diversion program. Even the judge on the case was pushing for diversion program, but the prosecution, with the pressure from the police foundation, they wouldn't agree to it. So anyway, long story short on that end, I ended up, after a year, pleading guilty to 1 charge, I think battery on law enforcement. Adjudication was withheld, so I don't have a record. And I didn't have any conditions, anything I had to do. I had already done anger management course at the suggestion of my lawyer, and I had joined FLA, Florida Lawyers Assistance, that Professor Barcalargi mentioned and Miles had mentioned. FLA, if you have any kind of issue with drugs or alcohol in your past, even if you think it's something simple like a DUI 10 years ago, you really need to go to FLA. As Miles mentioned, it's a program where you are drug and alcohol tested, you go to a certain number of meetings per week, and this shows the Florida Bar that you are getting by without using any substances. So I joined them in April of 2011. I graduated in May of 2011. My hearing for the bar was in July of 2012, okay? So a whole extra year. My criminal case ended December 2011, I guess, yeah. And I'll say this about the hearings, okay? I would rather take the bar again than go to one of those hearings. It is petrifying. You have a panel of people who pick apart, everything you've ever done and why you made stupid decisions and all this. It's very, very scary. But I'll say this as well, Professor Barcalargi prepared me completely. Every question they asked me, I knew how to answer. And really with the Florida Board of Bar Examiners, it's not so much about what you've done, it's about taking responsibility for what you've done and being candid, okay? Whatever it is that you've done, you have to own it, completely own it. I remember during the hearing, they asked, what is your drug of choice? And I didn't realize my answer could be alcohol, because obviously I was there because of alcohol. And I was like, weed. And after, apparently I didn't need to say that. I thought they were wondering, right? So you got to be completely open. Oh, but I have to add another thing. So I graduated in May of 2000. Am I going over my time?
Well, a couple more minutes.
Okay.
Yeah.
I graduated in May of 2011. A week after I graduated, I fell off a horse and I fractured my spine. I went to Canada for the time period that I was going to study for the bar because I couldn't take care of myself. I couldn't bend over. I couldn't do anything. And I was partly going to see a spine specialist. While I was there, my boyfriend, who lived in Canada, I went to his house after he drove me to Montreal to go to the spine specialist. Turns out his roommate and best friend was dealing coke, okay? So I go to bed, and I'm woken up by the Quebec, what?
Royal Canadian Mounted Police.
No. The Quebec SWAT team with guns in my face, telling me to get down. I'm like, my back is broken, like, give me a minute, kind of thing. Arrested. So at this point, I'm like, there's no way I'm ever going to be able. I'm like, I'm giving up. I don't even want to take the bar in 3 weeks. This is ridiculous. They wanted me. They knew that I had nothing to do with it because actually they had been surveilling the house and they had followed him to the airport to pick me up in my wheelchair.
May I add something here? As my client, you love it when your client follows your advice. My advice was dump the boyfriend.
Yeah, dump the boyfriend. And so the Quebec police, even though they knew I had nothing to do with it, they said, if you don't say that you know that this guy is dealing coke, we're going to charge you. And number one, am I supposed to say this? I'm not a rat. But number two, I really didn't know. I lived in Florida. I came up there. So I didn't rat on him, and so they charged me. They charged me with possession of methamphetamine. And crack cocaine with the purpose of trafficking. I've never even seen methamphetamine. I don't even know. So come back. Yeah, this is like 2 weeks before the bar, I want to say. Come back. I was like, I couldn't even deal with telling the bar right away. I was like, I don't even know at this point. This is horrible. Anyway, those got dropped. Took the bar, passed the bar. We had my hearing. The following July, I got 4 years of conditional admission. So 4 years, no drinking, nothing like that. Think about that. When you graduate, you're going to want to celebrate, right? No glass of wine, no nothing. But I'm happy to report that I've been an attorney since December 2012, and my 4 years is up in 3 weeks. And bottom line, you have to be candid. Sorry, I went on too long.
I just have two things to say to you, right? I've been practicing law in South Florida for 39 years, so not only do I know a lot of lawyers who are still practicing like me, but I've taught a lot of them in these 3 counties. So here are the 2 things I had to say to you. Some of you are going to ignore everything you've heard, especially the ones on the phone. And so I'm going to, I know a lot about South Florida, so come to me on any Thursday or Friday. You can call me up. You've got my home number. If you want to be arrested, I can tell you where you're more likely to be arrested in South Florida, South Beach, Fort Lauderdale. I can tell you where. Just go to the place where you get it. Also, because you don't want to hire whoever your bondsman says, tell me the crime you intend to commit, and I'll recommend several lawyers who are superb at representing people. Why leave it to chance? Why be surprised? Obviously, I'm hoping none of this happens, but unhappily, after 34 years of teaching here, I know some of it will. But I hope, if you have any questions, I'm on the 2nd floor. You all have my home number and my office number. That was with a handout. And the 3 panelists would be happy to answer any questions. So thank you very much for coming.